Iron City, hub for decoupling materials from China. Earns $8 billion annually. Episode 22. Chongjin Economic Development Zone. Creating the miracle on the Taedong River. North Korea's Workers' Party can do a market economy. North Korea's Chongjin Economic Development Zone is projected to generate an annual revenue of $8 billion once the Rason-Chongjin East Coast Belt is completed, following denuclearization and the introduction of a market economy. The Chongjin Economic Development Zone is one of the regional economic development zones designated around Chongjin City in North Hamgyong Province, utilizing the representative heavy chemical and port industrial infrastructure of North Korea's East Coast. Around 2013-2014, it was evaluated as having high potential among the 13 to 19 economic development zones designated nationwide by North Korea, but actual development progress has been very slow and limited. Chongjin has been a traditional center of the steel, chemical, and machinery industries since the Japanese colonial period, to the extent that it was called the City of Iron. Chongjin City is North Korea's third largest city with a population of 680,000 and is a major heavy industry and port city second only to Pyongyang. The most decisive strength of Chongjin as a location for a special economic zone is the trinity of its proximity to world-class iron mines and North Korea's largest steel works, as well as the presence of an ice-free port on the East Sea and Chinese and Russian consulates. Japan constructed the steelworks in Chongjin with the aim of simultaneously utilizing the massive electricity generated by the Jangjin River hydroelectric power plant and the enormous reserves of the Musan iron mine. After liberation, North Korea took over the facility and operates it as the Kimchak Iron and Steel Complex. Chongjin Port is one of the largest ports on the East Sea and is home to a concentration of facilities including the Chongjin Iron and Steel Works, a chemical fiber factory, the Hamgyongbuk shipyard, and machinery factories. Chongjin is the mecca of North Korea's steel and machinery industry, and recently, in accordance with the maintenance and reinforcement strategy aimed at self-reliance in the metal and chemical industries, the introduction of energy-saving steel-making processes and modernization work at the Kimchak Iron and Steel Works have been carried out. Chongjin Port, along with Rason Port, is a key port on the East Coast. Amid the recent trend of strengthening economic cooperation with Russia, its role as a transit hub for transporting Russian cargo to Asia is being emphasized. The Chongjin Economic Development Zone consists of two districts covering an area of 5.4 square kilometers. The zone occupies an area of 3.7 square kilometers, including parts of Wolpo-ri and Suseong-dong in Songpyeong District, Chongjin City, and 1.7 square kilometer in Namseok-ri. The development zone is planned to be constructed as an economic zone based on metal processing, machinery manufacturing, the production and export processing of construction materials, electronic products, and light industrial goods, combined with international cargo transit transport utilizing Chongjin Port. More specifically, it is expected that a production base for secondary and tertiary metal processing products using iron products produced at the Kimchak Iron and Steel Complex in the Namseok-ri district, a manufacturing base for machinery and electronic products focused on the reproduction and processing of hydraulic machinery, precision machinery, robots, and rotary presses, and a production and export processing base for construction materials and light industrial products will be developed. Furthermore, we will renovate and expand Chongjin Port to develop cargo transit with China and neighboring countries, as well as bonded processing and trade through this process. We will also increase the proportion of technology-intensive processing industries by leveraging the abundant labor force and scientific and technological resources surrounding the development zone. We introduce the key hinterland infrastructure of the Chongjin Economic Development Zone. The Musan iron mine is the largest open-pit iron mine in East Asia. As an open-pit mine, the Musan iron mine consists of 5 mining blocks distributed across an area of over 130 kilometers. It is estimated to contain approximately 3 to 7 billion tons of iron ore containing 24% iron. According to the Convergence Research Group for Mineral Resource Development of the Korean Peninsula at the Korea Institute of Geoscience and Mineral Resources, The iron reserves at the Musan mine were estimated at around 3 billion tons as of 2016. Prior to UN sanctions against North Korea, annual production reached 8 million tons based on this. Even a conservative estimate represents a vast amount sufficient for approximately 400 years of mining. As it is an open-pit mine, mining costs are extremely low, but the quality of the ore is relatively low, so it must be improved through magnetic separation to be used for iron making. China has already invested in this mine. Yanbian Tianqi Industry and Trade Co. Ltd. has been investing in the Musan iron mine since 2003. Since taking approximately 600,000 tons of ore in 2004, it has consistently imported 450,000 to 500,000 tons annually, making it the largest volume among land border customs between North Korea and China. The Kimchek Iron and Steel Complex is North Korea's largest steelworks. The production capacity of the Kimchek Iron and Steel Complex is estimated to be approximately 2.4 million tons of pig iron, 2.4 million tons of steel, and 1.4 million tons of rolled steel. Although it is North Korea's largest single industrial base with 50,000 employees and a site of 1.3 million pyong, the actual operating rate is assessed to be only 30 to 40% of the estimated production capacity due to severe equipment obsolescence. Chongjin Port has been designated as a free trade port in the East Sea. As an ice-free port on the East Sea, Chongjin Port holds the status of a free trade port connected to ports in Japan and Russia. The port is linked to hinterland refractory industries, such as the Chongjin Refractory Factory and the Gangdok Refractory Factory, and functions as an export hub. Located 70 kilometers from the Rason Special Economic Zone, it serves as a key axis in the formation of the Rason-Chongjin East Coast Industrial Belt. The magnesite from the Rason-Chongjin mine is a strategic resource of the world's largest scale. In addition to iron ore, Hamgyong Province, located in the hinterland of Chongjin, possesses the world's largest reserves of magnesite. The U.S. Geological Survey USGS estimated the economically viable magnesite reserves at 450 million tons based on magnesium, ranking third in the world, while domestic Korean institutions estimate them to be between 6 and 7 billion tons, ranking first in the world. Rason-Chongjin Mine is an open-pit mine that possesses the world's largest reserves for a single mine, and because the entire mountain is composed of magnesite, it is called the Platinum Mine. Promising industrial sectors for magnesite include metallurgy, refractory industry, military weapons industry, aerospace industry, high-tech electronic equipment, and lightweighting and fuel efficiency in the automotive industry utilizing magnesium. However, the reality faces various practical limitations, the most significant of which is the structural limitation of power supply. The most serious constraint in Chongjin is electricity. The Kimchek Iron and Steel Complex itself is a massive consumer of electricity, but the power supply to the entire city of Chongjin is extremely unstable, serving as a fundamental obstacle to attracting foreign investment in the manufacturing sector. Although there are nearby hydroelectric power plants at Chongjin River and Bujong River, their supply capacity is estimated to be only 30–40% of demand due to aging infrastructure and insufficient facilities. The Korea Institute for International Economic Policy, KEEP, analyzes the Chongjin Economic Development Zone as a regional economic development zone with high potential, yet points out its structural limitations, noting the lack of actual foreign investment attraction to date. Although more than 10 years have passed since its designation in 2013, progress remains limited to the systematization of relevant legislation. If UN sanctions are eased or lifted following denuclearization, and North Korea pursues a Chinese-style gradual opening including price liberalization, mixed ownership, expansion of private property rights, and the strengthening of special laws for special zones, Chongjin has the potential to re-emerge as a hub for the heavy chemical, port, and shipbuilding industries on the East Coast. Its geographical strengths include the year-round ice-free port on the East Sea, maritime accessibility to Russia and Japan, and an existing heavy industry base. In the short term, 1 to 3 years, the plan involves modernizing Chongjin Port to expand the primary processing and export of steel and chemical products through logistics investments from China and Russia, and converting existing shipyards to private ownership to begin the construction of merchant and fishing vessels. During the intermediate phase of 3 to 7 years, heavy chemical clusters encompassing steel, non-ferrous metals, and chemicals will be formed, and the shipbuilding and offshore plant industries will be fostered to link supply chains with resources in Siberia, Russia. In the long term, the region will grow into a logistics and heavy industry hub for Northeast Asia, completing the East Coast Economic Belt linked to logistics along the Rason-China-Russia border. The influx of South Korean technology and capital will enable rapid upgrades in the shipbuilding and steel sectors. The Chongjin Economic Development Zone is projected to become a Northeast Asian hub for heavy industry and materials components following denuclearization. Denuclearization and the lifting of international sanctions will transform Chongjin from a mere industrial city into a member of the global supply chain. Investments in the modernization of the steel and metal industries will establish production lines for high-value-added steel plates and special steel, creating a supply base for basic materials necessary for the Northeast Asian automotive and shipbuilding industries. Investment in a multimodal logistics terminal will secure the shortest logistics route connecting China's 3 northeastern provinces, the East Sea, Japan, and North America, through the modernization of Chongjin Port and the expansion of the railway network. Investment in machinery and equipment manufacturing will establish assembly complexes for construction-heavy equipment and agricultural machinery, creating export bases for North Korea's domestic construction market and the Russian Far East. Investment in renewable energy infrastructure will establish an eco-friendly energy self-sufficiency model to resolve chronic power shortages through the construction of wind and solar power complexes. If denuclearization progresses and the environment for developing the Chongjin Economic Development Zone is established, competition among neighboring countries will ensue. China will stake everything on securing access to Chongjin Port to secure a logistics corridor in Jilin Province. In particular, it will seek to expand its influence through investment in road infrastructure connecting Chongjin and Yanji. Russia has a strategy to export Siberian resources such as coal and crude oil through Chongjin. It views Chongjin as an extension of the railway network linked to the Rason-Chongjin project. South Korea will pursue the establishment of an inter-Korean steel cluster by combining the technological capabilities of major steel companies like POSCO with North Korea's resources. This will serve as an opportunity to expand the scope of South Korea's heavy chemical industry to the North Korean East Coast. For Japan, Chongjin holds deep historical ties, as it served as a key hub for the past repatriation of Korean residents in Japan to North Korea. It is highly likely that small and medium-sized enterprises in the machinery and precision instrument sectors will explore opportunities to enter the market once sanctions are lifted. Let us examine the competitive landscape of participants by industrial investment category in the Chongjin Economic Development Zone following denuclearization. Modernization of steel and metals. This is a core investment sector. Current participants. China's Yanbian Tianqi Industry and Trade is importing Musan iron ore, taking in 450,000 to 500,000 tons annually. Aside from this, there is no other foreign investment. Competitive entrants after denuclearization. These include South Korea's POSCO Technology and Joint Venture, Hyundai Steel Joint Venture, China's Ankang Steel and Baogang, Japan's Nippon Steel and JFE Steel, and Europe's Arcelor Mittal. Competitive landscape competition in this sector is not merely about attracting investment, but rather a package negotiation involving mining rights for the Musan iron mine and the modernization of facilities at the Kimchak Iron and Steel Works. POSCO possesses existing technical data, having conducted a sample survey of the Musan mine around 2005, and can achieve the fastest entry if aligned with the South Korean government's inter-Korean economic cooperation policies. Chinese steel companies will aim to expand mining rights by leveraging their previous investment experience in the Musan mine. Japanese and European steel companies will approach the market from a buyer's position as a source for steel materials shifting away from China, but they will prefer long-term offtake contracts over direct investment. The key competitive point is the transition to the electric arc furnace EAF method. Maintaining the existing blast furnace method is less expensive but lacks carbon competitiveness, whereas switching to the EAF method requires large-scale initial investment but can dramatically enhance export competitiveness within the EU Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism (CBAM) environment. The processing and export business for magnesite and refractory materials. Current participants. North Korea's own refractory factories, such as the Chongjin Refractory Factory and the Kangdok Refractory Factory, are currently in operation. There is a history of small-scale magnesite exports to China. Post-denuclearization, competitive entrants. These include South Korea's POSCO Chemical, Japan's Kurosaki Harima, the world's third-largest refractory manufacturer, Germany's Licard, the U.S.'s RHI Magnesita, and China's Haicheng Refractory Enterprise. Competitive landscape. The processing export business, which involves processing the world's largest magnesite reserves for export, aligns with the immediate demand from the EU steel and cement industries seeking a refractory supply chain independent of China. In particular, the marketability of refractories produced in Chongjin is high as demand for non-Chinese refractories is surging under EU Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism (CBAM) regulations. Japan's Kurosaki Harima and Germany's RHI Magnesita are the most active candidates for investment in production bases. This is the civilian conversion project for precision machinery, robots, and drones. Current participants' domestic defense industry-related companies in North Korea are operating privately, competitors entering the market. After denuclearization, these include South Korea's Hanwha Aerospace Cooperation in Defense Conversion to Civilian Use, LIG Nex 1, Doosan Robotics, Japan's Fanuc Industrial Robots, and Germany's Siemens Factory Automation. Competitive landscape. Converting the mechanical and electronic technologies North Korea has accumulated over decades in the fields of precision, guided weapons and rockets into civilian drones, precision agricultural machinery, and industrial robots is the long-term direction for high-value-added industries in this region. If an international verification system, including monitoring the civilian conversion of military technology, is established during the denuclearization process, technological cooperation between South Korean and Japanese companies will become feasible. The key is to learn from the failure of Russia's military-industrial complex conversion to civilian use and thoroughly transplant these technologies into a civilian professional management system. This is a fisheries processing and export business. Current participants. They have a history of operating joint venture fishing grounds with China prior to sanctions and are currently conducting their own fishing operations on a small scale. Competitors entering the market after denuclearization. These include South Korea's Dongwon Group, CJ Seafood, and Sajo Group Japan's Maruha Nichiro, and Nisho EY Fisheries and US and EU seafood buyers. Competitive landscape. The East Sea is rich in high-value marine resources, including pollock, squid, sauri, and sea urchins. Establishing a processing and export base for frozen, smoked, canned, and dried seafood centered around Chongjin Port would enable immediate foreign currency revenue. Korean fisheries companies hold an overwhelming advantage in processing technology and sales networks to Japan and the United States. The Rason-Chongjin East Coast Multimodal Logistics Project. Current participants Chongjin Port holds free trade port status and is currently handling small-scale cargo from China and Japan. Competitive entrants after denuclearization. These include South Korea's HMM and Hyundai Glovis Japan's NYK and MOL Singapore's PSA port operations and Russia's FESCO. Competitive landscape. It is most efficient to form a 70-kilometer dual port belt structure along the east coast, connecting the Rason transshipment hub to Chongjin Industrial Port and export processing in conjunction with the development of Rason Port. Since Chongjin has a much more developed hinterland industry than Rason, it can divide roles as an export port for manufactured goods and steel, while Rason serves as a transshipment and logistics hub. North Korea offers various investment incentives. The most powerful incentive is the provision of a package of mining and processing rights. By bundling the mining rights to the Musan iron mine with processing rights within the Chongjin Economic Development Zone, it offers foreign capital seeking vertical integration from raw materials to processed goods opportunities that are already impossible in China. The mining rights are designed as long-term leases of 30 to 50 years, while the processing rights are structured as a 50-year exclusive. The combination of low-cost labor and skilled technical personnel is the second incentive. Chongjin possesses a manufacturing workforce derived from its urban population of 680,000, along with a pool of technical personnel produced by North Korea's science and engineering-focused education system. Monthly wages ranging from $80 to $120 are less than half of those in China or Vietnam. The promise of supplying carbon-competitive steel is the third incentive. Attracting investment from South Korea and Europe on the condition of modernizing electric furnace systems enables the export of low-carbon steel materials that meet EU CBAM standards. This commitment itself serves as leverage to drive investment decisions by EU steel companies. Legal reinforcement of Chongjin Port's status as a free trade port includes the free entry and exit of foreign vessels, duty-free inventory storage within bonded areas, and a 24-hour customs clearance system. Tax benefits include a 15-year exemption from corporate tax within the Economic Development Zone, zero tariffs on steel and mineral exports, and the liberalization of dividend remittances. A strategy to pursue the best interest for North Korea is also necessary. Principle 1. Maximize profits through the vertical integration of processing from the Musan iron mine rather than simple exports. Exporting Musan iron ore to China in its raw form represents the lowest profit model. The best option for North Korea is to vertically integrate the entire process from magnetic separation to sintering, steelmaking, and special steel processing within the Chongjin Economic Development Zone to increase the value added per ton by at least 3 to 5 times. Negotiate a structure in which North Korea retains 55–60% of the profits while securing technology through a joint venture with POSCO. Principle 2. A strategy to bundle mining rights and technology transfer as exchange conditions. In exchange for granting mining rights to foreign companies, a mandatory technology transfer plan is specified in the contract. Conditions include training 500 North Korean engineers within 3 years and achieving a North Korean workforce ratio of over 50% within 5 years. This is the North Korean version of the technology absorption clauses used by China in foreign joint ventures during the 1980s. Principle 3. Negotiate magnesite as a strategic resource package alongside rare earth elements. Instead of negotiating magnesite separately, rare earth elements, magnesite, and iron ore from North Hamgyong Province will be bundled into a strategic mineral package and negotiated at the level of intergovernmental and intergovernmental agreements between the U.S. and EU governments. Higher prices and long-term contracts will be secured through U.S. government procurement based on the Defense Production Act, DPA and EU Critical Raw Materials Act CRMA partnership agreements, rather than through individual companies. Principle 4. Establish a complementary relationship rather than a competitive one through a division of roles with Rason. The Rason Transshipment and Logistics Hub and the Chongjin Production and Export Processing Hub will not compete but will be integrated into a 70-kilometer East Coast Economic Belt. By integrating Chongjin's steel, refractory materials, and processed seafood into Rason's global logistics network, both regions will secure economies of scale that they could not achieve independently. While the two special economic zones will be managed by a single development agency, their respective specialized functions will be operated under separate legal entities. Principle 5. Set attracting investment in power infrastructure as the top priority. Set the connection to Russian gas, linkage with Korea Electric Power Corporation KEPCO, and investment in solar power facilities as the first agenda items to negotiate for the development of Chongjin as part of the post-denuclearization energy support package. This is because any investment in manufacturing is practically impossible unless the power issue is resolved. From North Korea's perspective, the most efficient strategy is to include the connection of an East Sea submarine cable with KEPCO or the construction of a combined cycle power plant linked to Russian gas in the economic compensation package during the initial stages of denuclearization. Principle 6. Brand Chongjin as an alternative hub for a steel supply chain independent of China. Leveraging the trend of strengthening anti-dumping and CBAM regulations on Chinese steel by the U.S. and EU position Chongjin as a source of non-Chinese steel certified by the U.S. and EU. To this end, preemptively pursue consultations on the certification of origin for Chongjin steel with the U.S. Department of Commerce and the EU Trade Commission immediately after the denuclearization agreement. This branding itself serves as the most powerful incentive to accelerate investment decisions by global steel companies such as POSCO, Hyundai Steel, and JFE. This is the outlook for potential revenue in the Chongjin Economic Development Zone following denuclearization. Under a conservative scenario, annual foreign currency revenue of approximately $1 billion is possible, comprising $500 million in steel exports, $200 million in magnesite and refractories, $100 million in fisheries processing, and $100 million in port logistics. Under a baseline scenario, the total is approximately $3 billion annually, comprising the resumption of 8 million tons of annual production at the Musan iron mine, $2 billion in special steel exports, $500 million in magnesite and refractories, $300 million in precision machinery and drone exports, and $300 million in fisheries and logistics. Under an optimistic scenario, the total reaches $8 billion annually, driven by the completion of the Rason-Chongjin East Coast Belt, the modernization of electric furnaces to establish a 5 million ton annual special steel production system, and exports certified by the EU CBAM. Chongjin is a city in North Korea possessing the strongest heavy industry potential, with the possibility of developing into a new industrial hub on the east coast of the Korean peninsula, going beyond mere resource exports. When combined with Rason's function as a logistics hub, this potential is amplified to 3 to 4 times the level of standalone development. Chongjin is a place where heavy industry, the root of the North Korean economy, is alive and breathing. Its success will serve as a benchmark for North Korea to be recognized as a nation with production competitiveness, moving beyond a mere consumer market. Next time, I will talk about the Pyongyang Yunjong High-Tech Development Zone. Thank you.